Hey there, dragons and fellow Philadelphia friends. My name is Eva, and welcome back to the new and improved Drexel Update. Going forward, we are going to give more context about the people and topics we are interviewing. Then, we are going to team up with our experts, our wonderful interviewees, to discuss the topics more and talk about how you can get more involved. Today's topic: global citizenship. We share this planet with 7.9 billion people, and with that comes different religions, cultures, and just general ways of life. You thought getting along with your freshman year randomly assigned roommate was hard? Well, now try getting along with 7.9 billion of your worldly neighbors. The United States of America is the third most populous country in the world, coming in at a whopping 332 million people. In this large country, we have created our own communities, and a large issue in the world right now is being able to interconnect these communities and appreciate their differences. Now, let's take this to a global scale. All these small communities inside the United States not only have to be united to one another, but now they have access to all the smaller communities that make up bigger countries around the globe. Being good global citizens consists of not only creating an environment where your actual physical neighbors are living in interconnectedness, but the entire world has an awareness of different economics, people, and social issues. To help us talk about global citizenship and what it means to be a good global citizen, today we have special guest Mr. Adam Zahn, the Director in the Office of Global Engagement here at Drexel University. Hi, Mr. Zahn. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's so great to have you on the show. Can you introduce yourself of just who you are at Drexel?
Sure. So my role is director in the Office of Global Engagement, and our office is the high-level strategic office that focuses on helping to enhance Drexel's global impact. So that it means a wide variety of different initiatives, from study abroad to international faculty research, and on-campus global events and programs.
Awesome. So you definitely have knowledge of what we're talking about. So we already gave a 30,000-foot overview of what it means to be a global citizen. But to you specifically, what does it mean to be a global citizen, and how can we become better global citizens?
Sure. That's a really good question. I thought about it for a while because I think the definition is probably evolving, certainly in response to the pandemic. But to me, global citizenship is basically the idea that one's identity sort of transcends borders. And just as you would think about civic engagement, which Drexel obviously very much supports, being the idea that community enhancement, community engagement is not up to one person, we can tie that to the role of what it means to be a global citizen. So it's that your shared responsibilities are not just to your hyper local community, but to the globe largely. And so that means anything from empathy and exploring cultures other than one's own. It means the reciprocity and exchange of ideas and of cultures and of identities. It means working together to find solutions to real life challenges. And so the role of a global citizen is it's a lot. It's a lot to take on, but I think it's very critical. I think especially the pandemic has shined a light on this. But I think as we become more increasingly interconnected, being a global citizen is going to really help make change for the better.
Yeah, definitely, because it's all about communication and working together. And so, how do you recommend we transcend these borders? Is it by traveling? Is it just by talking to people through Zoom?
Sure. Well, global citizenship does not require travel. And I think that might be a bit of a misconception. It certainly can be enhanced by travel. Certainly for me, my travels, I've been to 30 countries, and it's really sort of um, shifted my perception of the world for the better. And so travel is certainly an element that I would certainly recommend those who have the ability to do so to experience. But to be a global citizen just means being able to, again, see through just your identity and your community to having that exchange of ideas. And so certainly Zoom has become a way for us to connect in ways that it hasn't done before. Certainly social media has done that, sometimes for the better, sometimes with maybe more negative impacts. But certainly travel is not required. What is required is sort of being open to experience, being open to new ideas, and having sort of those critical conversations and reflections. I think reflection is so essential in becoming a global citizen. With those that come from different experiences in one's own. So really, Drexel is a global campus. Philadelphia is an international city. There are certainly ways, in your own backyard, to use that expression, to experience sort of the exchange of new ideas and of different perspectives without having to leave the country.
Yeah, and that's so great to know, especially in a COVID environment that even though we're stuck in our homes, we can still be worldly and experience. So, since you've been so traveled and you work in the Office of Engagement, how have you guys been operating to become more global in a pandemic?
Sure. So a big part of this has been taking the courses that students are taking at Drexel and enhancing them with global options. And so I know that we've had a couple of different, what we call virtual study abroad experiences. So these were courses that were formerly called intensive courses abroad. So they were travel embedded courses that students would take with a faculty member. And because they weren't able to happen, faculty members sort of brought the travel to the students through Zoom. And that could mean through virtual tours, it could mean meeting with industry partners abroad and learning about the work they do. So that was certainly one way that we sort of tried to internationalize the curriculum. The other method is our global classrooms, which are virtual exchanges in which students partner with a university outside of the US and work on a project with their peers at a different university. So a great example of that, we have students in our business foundations of business course who work with students at the University of Strathclyde and the Berlin School of Economics and Law to develop 6-minute pitch projects on developing a business that helps to alleviate some sort of social issue. So that's you're taking as a Drexel student, your experiences here at Drexel in Philadelphia, wherever you're from, and working alongside your peers in a different country to come up with a business solution. So that's one example of what it means to foster global exchange virtually. So that's been two ways that we've really sought to make sure students can still have global experiences despite not being able to travel at the moment.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. And so, since you've been so traveled and you've had students experience all these different things, what would you say is the biggest culture shock or biggest cultural difference you see in any country compared to the United States?
I think the one that becomes most salient when I travel is sort of an individualistic versus collective perspective. And we often see that sort of individualistic. We think of more of sort of the Western hemisphere. We think of the US, maybe Europe, versus a more collectivist approach in many Asian countries um, and elsewhere. And I think that is always the most interesting, salient cultural difference that I notice in terms of how we think about our direct role to the community.
Mhm. Yeah, that is really interesting. Do you hope to see other aspects of those cultures like embedded in the United States?
United States is such an interesting place when it comes to cultures as a melting pot. I think because the U.S. is a melting pot of so many different cultures and experiences, I do think we have communities here that do share that collectivist knowledge and collectivist cultural approach within pockets of sort of a largely individualistic society. So certainly would love to see our country become a place that respects different identities, respects different cultures, and uses people's languages, people's cultural experiences to better communities.
Yeah, definitely as a freshman, I've learned how many international students we have here at the university, and I can become more cultured and learn about different things just by going to school with other people, which has been really amazing. And then if you expand that beyond just Drexel, in the Philadelphia area itself, we have so many different nationalities and cultures and different sections of the city, which is so amazing.
Absolutely. And I want students at Drexel to really take advantage of those opportunities, especially being able to learn from their peer students who might not be from the US. One really good example, I teach the Introduction to Civic Engagement course, as well as a few other courses. And I always want my students who are from outside the US to talk about what does civic engagement mean to them? What does volunteering and service learning look like from where they're from? Because it can be very different outside the US, this idea of civic engagement, because when you think about countries that might have that collectivist ideology, it might be sort of already embedded within their day to day in terms of, well, civic engagement is how we live, right? Versus a place that might be more individualistic, where civic engagement needs to require just maybe a little bit more effort in terms of gathering people together to really make change. So it's really interesting to hear from students who, in that class in particular, who are saying, we don't really have this concept necessarily of civic engagement and volunteering, but here's what we do have when in terms of support and resources to better communities.
Yeah, and that's amazing. So, since we can do global citizenship right here from home, and it's so important to uniting together to make global change, what is an issue you see in the world right now that you think could be solved by better global citizenship?
That's a really good question. I'm going to say maybe two things. One would certainly be issues affecting the environment. Um, the approach that is needed for climate change is certainly a global issue, and it's going to look different in different locations. And the impacts are going to be staggered, sort of, in terms of how serious, they impact, let's say, small island nations. But it's going to require that we all have a hand in addressing policy changes, mitigation, adaptation. And so Drexel is actually a permanent observer to the UN Framework Convention for Climate Change. We participate in the annual Conference of Party meetings, or COP. And I've been to a couple of those along with some Drexel students and faculty. And you really learn sort of that the approach to climate change really is not going to be something solved by one government or one country. It's something that is going to require local participation at the global level. So that's probably one that I can think of sort of as one of the most salient pressing challenges. And I would say the other challenge is, as communication, as social media becomes sort of more ubiquitous and more as it connects us, being able to support emerging youth's mental health needs, I would say, identity formation, and the ways in which we relate to each other. Social media can be really amazing for connecting us, but can also sort of become a barrier in terms of sort of concealing the real self, if you will, right? Social media is very crafted. And so that's an issue that I think a lot about in terms of, well, how do we get through sort of the veneer of social media so that people can really connect in a more nuanced way?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And so now, since we have these call to actions, what are some ways Drexel students specifically can become more globally aware, and how are there opportunities for that in Philadelphia or at the university itself?
I will make a plug for our annual student conference on global challenges in May. This is an opportunity for students to present on topics that they're interested in, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, as it relates to a larger global issue. And this year, our issue is the theme of disaster, which is quite appropriate given, sort of, again, the world's challenges of the pandemic and climate change and sustainability. This is an event that we do annually. This year, it's in conjunction with Pennoni Honors College. We're going to have two great keynote speakers who are not from the United States and are going to talk about sort of the role of communities in disaster from the UK and from Nigeria. So two different global perspectives. And it's a chance for students to hear again from their peers outside the US. We invite students from outside the US to also present during the conference, and to really think about one challenge, bring together all of our lived experiences, all of our research and share of ideas together in one space. So that is certainly one way to be engaged. There are a lot of other ways to be engaged as a global citizen. Certainly the English Language Center has a lot of opportunities to connect with students, but there's so much to learn from those students who have obviously speak in different languages as well, and have different experiences to help Drexel students enhance their language skills. Being involved with groups like Citizen Diplomacy International in the city, being involved in, just as you mentioned earlier, just getting out into the different neighborhoods and experiencing a meal at a restaurant that has a different culture than your own is a great way to sort of broaden your understanding of global communities.
That's amazing. Great. So that's all I have for you today, guys. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to our channel down below, and follow us on Instagram at inside_ambition. See you next time.